In the last episode, I finished applying the color and I let it sit and cure overnight before I started applying the decals. So I'm going for the standard sort of look and feel and using the original decals that came with the kit. It came with a set of blue decals and also white, and I'm deciding to go for the ones with the white in the center and then the black surrounding it. So before applying the decal itself, I'm putting down a little bit of decal setting solution. This helps the decal slide into place a little bit better, also acts as an extra sort of glue, and then also softens the decal just a tiny bit so it conforms to the shape of the hood really nicely. With the decal now positioned pretty much centered just by eye, I removed a little bit of moisture from underneath so it wouldn't slide around as much anymore and started to settle a little bit, but could just be moved a couple millimeters here and there if required before I started measuring to make sure that it was absolutely dead center. So like I said, the moisture is now gone and I could measure just all of the four corners to be absolutely sure that it is where it needs to be, because after this I'm going to set it down with a bit of heat and maybe even some softening solution to put it down permanently, and once that is completed you cannot move the decal anymore. You can only remove it and then be left with no decal at all, so it's best to be sure and make absolutely certain that it is centered. Now with the main stripe on the hood completed, I could move on to putting the bird on the nose cone itself and start applying the one on the roof and the trunk and some various other logos as well all around. Just like on the hood, it is put down generally by eye, and in my case it is pretty spot on most of the time, but still I want to be sure. So again, measure at least once, no need to cut this one, and then put the decal down. Two stripes down, one to go. This one needs to be applied on the trunk, and also a little bit needs to go onto the spoiler itself. So this one actually does need to be cut in that little bit of a panel gap that is between the spoiler and the main trunk. So just in general, the exact same procedure as before. A little bit of decal setting solution underneath, the decal is applied, then it's centered, measured, the moisture is removed, and once it is completely in place and conformed, I let it cure and dry for a couple of hours, or you could speed that process up with a heat gun and then make a nice sharp cut in the panel line and fold those decals over into the panel line so you can create a nice gap and it is not completely filled over and smoothed out with the decal and lost after some clear coat. Before you start cutting, make sure that the decal is cured most of the way, and also use a fresh new blade. If you're using a blade that has been used before, it can tear up the decal and ruin it. With a fresh blade, it should slide through really easily and leave a nice clean cut. After cutting, I'm just applying a little bit of decal softening solution, so that the decal can conform into the actual panel gap itself and flow nicely with those body lines. Once those were all completed, the decals on the side and rear were also applied before letting it sit overnight and moving on to applying the clear coat. With the final decals applied and them fully cured, I could move on to clear coating. Now, if there is still a little bit of decal solution on the actual panels or decal, just wipe over it with a little bit of a damp towel to remove that and gently polish it out, so to speak. And then once that is fully dried, you can move it into the spray booth. The clear coat that I'm using is Roma SL. I will be leaving links in the description down below if you're interested. As always, I'm just applying a little bit of clear coat underneath the hood to make those edges nice and shiny and also get some coverage and protection, and then move on to the top side. Now, with there being a decal on this one, I want to apply a first dust coat lightly on there so the decal and the clear coat can acclimate to themselves or each other, so to speak, and then later on move on to a thicker coat on the second and even thicker and final coat on the third one. So for the body, the same. I removed all of the excess Decals Solutions, blew over it with a bit of air to remove any dust, then went over all of the decals, giving them a little bit of a light dusting before moving on to completely dusting the entire body, and then moving on a couple of minutes later for the full clear coat. All of the decals have now received their mist coat, so I'm moving on to all of those hard to reach, easy to forget spots in the wheel wells and underneath the bumper and all those other tight spots all around, and also doing the engine bay as well. I'm going for a bit of a street rod custom look on this one. Normally this would probably be painted flat black and not receive a lot of attention on the actual cars, but I painted it fully in the body color and going for a high gloss finish in the engine bay just as the rest of the body. Once that was all taken care of, I could move on to applying the clear on the rest of the body. The decals have already been sealed in a little bit with a mist coat, and I'm going over the entire body with a bit of a thicker coat just to get the first coat down. You could also just apply a nice mist coat, let it sit for 5 minutes and move on, but in this case, with the mist coat already applied to the decals, there isn't really that much need for this, and I can simply just move on with a pretty wet coat. But still on the misty side, not going for a super gloss finish for the first main coat on the body. The first coat on all of the hoods, the mirrors, and the smaller parts that were painted has now been curing for about 5 to 10 minutes, and I could move on to applying a second coat. The decals are fully sealed in with that first coat already, so I can now start applying a nice thick coat to achieve a super glossy finish. This is done on the hood, but of course also on the main body in the exact same way. Now, of course, with the engine bay being mounted to the body and also needing a glossy finish at the same time, I just applied a gloss finish to that one for a second coat as well before moving on to the body, but I didn't show it as I've already shown it before, and it's pretty tight of a spot to see any difference, so I'm just going for the main body in the video now. So the second coat has been applied, 5 minutes have passed to let that cure in the meantime, and I moved on to the third and final coat. Now with this clear coat, it is advised to not mix in any thinners on the first coat. You can add a little bit of thinners on the second coat and a little bit more on the third coat. Now in my case, I'm a little bit stubborn and was still experimenting with this clear a little bit more. So I applied this one for the second time. The first one was on the alpha, and in this case I did not apply or put any thinners in on the first coat, nor did I on the second coat. And on the third coat I just put in a super tiny amount just to see if it would make any difference. I actually spoke to the manufacturer of this and they advised to do add the thinners in there in the mixture just a little bit, and it should give a lot better of a result. I'm already pretty happy with the way that it is coming out though, so I might just be trying that out on the next build.